ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the TKDS Sports Network and Sports Now. Jackson Lightcap with you alongside Matthew Pennington. And yes, we have a bit of a different angle we mentioned last week. Reason why we didn't have our Thursday show, the studio was under some renovations. And hey, yes, we're still in the studio. The table moved to a different side of the room. So yeah, same place, but Matt, it looks like you're still trying to keep your mic up
It's
upright.
Not, yeah, I'm going to have to just hold it for this first segment. It's not staying. The arm doesn't want to stay still. It's if you watch it, it just, oh, wait, hold on. I think I actually got it. All right.
There you go.
I say that in about 5 to 10 seconds. It's probably going to start going back down. So hopefully it stays here, but I just got the feeling that it's about to start moving again.
So nonetheless, still a lot of renovations being made in the TKDS Sports Network studios, but we're super excited to see kind of what all transpires about this. But obviously, happy Monday. We welcome you to the TKDS Sports Network and Sports Now. Different location, same studio, same show, but Matt, we have an action-packed show to get into today. Of course, the Cleveland Browns, a big win yesterday over the Baltimore Ravens. The Cincinnati Bengals, a disappointing loss to the Houston Texans yesterday. That's all going to come later on in the show. We also have the shakeup of the AFC and including the AFC North as well. So nonetheless, a lot to come about in this show. A busy show. The Buckeyes get a win. We're talking some college football. We're talking some professional football. And if we have some time at the end, we'll also talk about some college basketball as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of craziness going on this past weekend. I mean, obviously, I'm a Browns fan, you can see by my hat, but I was not expecting that game to play out the way it did. I mean, to be fair, if you were watching that game, I myself included, kind of had the feeling that the Browns were already down and out when it was 24-9 in the later stages of the fourth quarter of that game. And the main reason I thought the Browns were down and out was because they were only kicking field goals and Baltimore was running all over the Browns defense. So there's another thing that was interesting. It was the number 1 and number 2 defense in the NFL. 64 combined points between both of those two teams that played yesterday. It's not, I guarantee you that's not what anybody expected from the two best defenses in the NFL facing off against each other yesterday.
Not certainly something I did not expect. Of course, the number 1 defense and the number 2 defenses in the NFL. So nonetheless, the Cleveland Browns, a big win over the Ravens. Cincinnati, again, a heartbreaking defeat to the Houston Texans at home yesterday. So we're getting into all of that later on in the show. But first, let's start off with some college football. And Matt, the last time that we talked about college football on the show was Wednesday because we had all of our high schools. We were off on Thursday, Friday, our high school show on Saturday morning. But, Matt, so it's been a while since we've been able to talk about college football. And actually, since the last time we've talked college football, Jim Harbaugh, head coach for the University of Michigan, has been suspended for the rest of the regular season by the Big Ten.
And yeah, the one thing that is unfortunate about it, obviously there's like appeals going around for it, but in the rules for the Big Ten, suspensions like that cannot be overturned. I don't know if they can't be reviewed, but I know they can't be overturned. So there's not anything that is going to be able to change when it comes down to Jim Harbaugh potentially being back for the game against Ohio State. But the other thing that's interesting, obviously, he's not allowed to coach the last 3 games of the season, but he's still allowed to coach practices and all that kind of stuff for the team. So it's a little interesting and weird, but yeah, it's big news in the college football world.
And it seems like Michigan, especially after that big win against Penn State on Saturday, it seems like there's been a lot of things circling around on social media. And the University of Michigan and the Michigan Wolverines, they have taken more of the victim side of things. And obviously, Jim Harbaugh suspended for the whole sign-stealing scandal by the Big Ten. And Michigan, they've taken the victim. They are playing the victim in this. And whether they're the true victim or not, to me, I think that that's the mindset that Michigan has to have because now they have some bulletin board material to go out and win some of these big games down the stretch.
Well, one thing that I will compare, obviously it hasn't been confirmed or denied that if there was cheating or not, but if they truly were cheating, and this isn't me just saying it as an Ohio State fan, if there was truly cheating going on, there's no reason for Michigan to be playing the victim.
No.
Not at all. But we still have yet to reach that point where it's confirmed or denied whether or not Michigan cheated or not, or they stole signs or whatever. So right now, it's not that I like that Michigan's playing the victim because Houston, the Astros, when they were caught cheating, they didn't really play the victim when they were caught cheating. So, like I said, To me, it'll be more justified once the NCAA has officially issued their ruling on the case and on the trial that's going on. But I'm not saying that they deserve to be saying that they're victims or they deserve to not be saying they're victims. But I think once the case is closed, then it'll be in my mind sound or not whether or not Michigan is claiming to be victims or whether they whether they should not be claiming to be victims after it. Because obviously, if they're found guilty, they're going to be cheating. There's no reason to be calling themselves victims. If they didn't cheat, they 100% have the right and have the say to be saying, hey, we didn't cheat. We're victims. What do you get? Like, you guys are coming after us for stuff we didn't do. So there's two sides to the coin. Whichever side ends up being the true side, whether or not it's heads or tails, it's really going to, for me personally, whichever side it lands on, it's going to determine whether or not I feel like Michigan should be playing victims or not.
You know, a wise man once told me that there are three sides to every story. There's one person's side, the other person's side, and somewhere in the middle belongs the truth. And that's one of the reasons why we have not talked about the whole Michigan cheating scandal on this show, because we think and we believe, both Matt and I believe, and the entire TKDS Sports Network crew believes that even Matt's a diehard Buckeyes fan. He's mentioned that multiple times on this show, but we believe that you can't speculate. You can't jump to conclusions, oh, they're guilty, until the investigation is carried out and a thorough investigation is carried out. So that's one. I know we mentioned it a couple weeks back, but we haven't really gone into detail and we haven't really gone into depth and talked about it because we feel like we owe it to the University of Michigan, not by speculating. There's a lot of speculating going on right now, whether they did it or not. And ultimately, there has yet to be a thorough investigation on the University of Michigan. It's still ongoing right now. And Matt, to me, I feel like the Big Ten has not given the Michigan Wolverines the respect of letting the NCAA carry out their thorough investigation. It seems like to me they have not been proven innocent. They have not been proven guilty. But remember the saying, it's innocent until proven guilty. That gets misconstrued here in the sports world for some reason, especially over the last decade or so. But it seems like the Big Ten, even though that the NCAA has yet to finish their thorough investigation on the University of Michigan, the Big Ten, they wanted to step in and suspend Harbaugh until the end of the year. What do you think about that?
I think for the Big Ten, the only reason they would end up doing it is a precautionary measure. Obviously, like I said, and you even brought it up, Jackson, as a diehard Buckeye fan, I don't think he should be suspended or any punishments should be weighed down upon the University of Michigan until they're proven guilty. If they are, you punish them. If not, you don't punish them at all. But I feel like the reason the Big Ten might have suspended Harbaugh is just as a precautionary measure, just in case if anything was going on, or just in case if Michigan actually cheated when it came to stealing signs and did all of it illegally. It might just be a precautionary measure for the Big Ten. I don't know for sure, but part of me thinks with some of the stuff that's come out, because a lot of Michigan fans are out there claiming there's nothing, when there has been receipts and there has been evidence given to the NCAA about tickets being bought to opponents' games. That's already been proven to be true. There's receipts and there's tickets bought for Michigan staffers to go to, say, Ohio State, Wisconsin, or say Penn State versus Minnesota, or something along those lines. There's receipts for those. So the idea that some people are saying that there's absolutely no evidence, there's no reason for it, obviously there has been some evidence that's come out. And then there's some people saying that, oh, they've already cheated, it's already guaranteed, hasn't been decided yet. So I'm in the middle on whether or not there should be. Obviously, right now, there shouldn't be punishment, in my opinion. But like I said, if they're found guilty, the punishment should be there.
Absolutely. And, that's one thing that I brought up the last thing I said. A lot of people are speculating right now, and that's one of the reasons why we have not talked about it. But since the Big Ten has taken action, now it's our job to break our silence and kind of give our thoughts and our 2 cents on that. But, man, I'm completely with you. If they are found guilty, in fact, then they should be punished. And they should be punished until the full extent from not just the Big Ten, but also the NCAA as well. But until that happens, it seems like there's a lot of people jumping to conclusions, including the Big Ten. The Big Ten, they may have taken that as a precautionary step. And because nothing has been finalized, whether Michigan, whether they've been found guilty or whether they've been found innocent, again, we don't know. We don't know the full story. We don't know the full truth because, again, there's a lot of people wanting to speculate, but at the end of the day, they're still conducting a thorough research and investigation. Until the NCAA rules in favor for or against Michigan, we can't make any assumptions on what's going to happen. But it seems like since the Big Ten maybe jumped to conclusions and suspended Jim Harbaugh, maybe that's why Michigan has come in to the final, I want to say third of the regular season, final quarter of the regular season as an underdog mentality. They're playing the victims right now, and it very well could be because the Big Ten, whether they're guilty or not, maybe the Big Ten jumped to conclusions, and that doesn't sit well with Michigan. Nonetheless, it's bulletin board material, and we saw Michigan, they utilized it against Penn State. They got a big win.
And yeah, the other reason I could see the Big Ten maybe suspending Jim Harbaugh is I'm not saying that they have more evidence than the NCAA has, but with how, I mean, I'm not saying that it's never going to happen to, say, a team like Ohio State or Michigan or a team like Georgia, but when it comes down to punishing teams, the Big Ten would have no reason to punish Michigan if there wasn't something. I'm not saying that this is the speculation going around, but Michigan, I'm not saying that just because they bring in some of the most money of any Big Ten team in the entire country, they deserve to get off scot-free with it, whatever happens. But you just, in my mind, I have the feeling that why would they do it in the first place if there wasn't anything? That's another thing that I have in my mind. Why would the Big Ten try to shoot down one of their best teams if there wasn't anything going on? I'm not saying that means there is something going on, but why would the Big Ten do it? It just doesn't make sense that the Big Ten would do it if there wasn't anything going on. To me, that's the furthest speculation part of me thinking about the whole case. That's the furthest I've gone when it comes to thinking about stuff that hasn't been confirmed or denied. But why would the Big Ten shoot down one of their biggest teams, their biggest money-making teams, too, because Michigan and Ohio State right now, obviously UCLA, a bunch of other teams are coming in, so there's going to be higher market teams coming into the Big Ten. But right now, when it comes to money-making teams, when it comes to merchandise sales and everything, Ohio State and Michigan are your big dogs in the Big Ten. I'm not saying that, like I said, I'm not saying that just because you bring in more money means you should not be punished or means you're never going to have any consequences dealt against you if you do something wrong, but I wouldn't see the Big Ten suspending Jim Harbaugh if there wasn't a valid reason for it.
Matt, let's move on. And we talked about Jim Harbaugh. He is suspended the final 3 games of the regular season. They already got a big win last week against Penn State on the road. They have Maryland this week, and then it's the game against the Ohio State Buckeyes back at home. Matt, is this a Michigan team that without Jim Harbaugh, what is their ceiling? Can they obviously take down Maryland, I beg your pardon? Can they end up pulling it out against Ohio State? Because the Ohio State, obviously, they played Michigan State, but nonetheless, a big win for the Buckeyes and a lot of confidence shooting into that offense led by Kyle McCord. I guess my question to you is, with the loss of Jim Harbaugh coaching on the sidelines for the next couple of weeks, does that hurt Michigan? Does that catch up to the Wolverines?
I'll say this much. With Harbaugh not being the head coach for the Wolverines, obviously there's some difference that's going to have. There's some different, I wouldn't say play calls, but there's going to be a different feel for the team. Obviously, there's going to be different changes and adjustments made throughout the game. But there's one thing that I will say. If Ohio State plays like they did against Michigan State, without Jim Harbaugh, I think it's very possible this Buckeyes team could win against Michigan. But that's just because Ohio State, they really only showed anything in the first half because that's all they really needed to play. I mean, we saw second-string players and we saw the second team come out on the field midway to the early stages of the third quarter for Ohio State. They were that far ahead of Michigan State and they were that confident in their team that they were able to take out Marvin Harrison, take out Henderson, take out Kyle McCord. I think McCord only got 1 drive in that second half. So you talk about how Ohio State played against Michigan State. If Ohio State plays like they did in the first half against Michigan, I have more confidence in this Ohio State team now than I did 4 days ago. It's a complete 180 for what this offense has done and what it's shown so far this season, what they were able to do against the Spartans.
And I will say this, Michigan State, it's obvious they have not had a great season. They're 3-7. They are tied for last in the Big Ten East Division with Indiana. Michigan State and the Spartans, they have not put together a great season on the field. They don't have that great of an offense. They have a horrific defense at times. That defense has not been great. But what do we always say about on this show, Matt? If you are a great team, you are supposed to beat your opponents how you are supposed to beat them. Ohio State should have won that game big against Michigan State, and guess what? They did just that, and that offense exploded. Matt, even last week heading into that game, we talked about how this could be a confidence booster for the Ohio State offense because the Buckeyes offense, they've been lacking confidence all season long, it seems like. That could be a game where you look at it and you may be able to see a turning point in the first-year starter, Kyle McCord. With that being said, we have to take a break. More Ohio State Buckeyes talk coming up when we return.
It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Happy Monday from our Sports Now team. Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington, Kevin Fowler, our producer as well. We're talking Ohio State Buckeyes and college football right here on this Monday. The Ohio State Buckeyes coming off a big win against Michigan State. And Matt, before we went to the break, we talked about how this game could put confidence, and not just a little confidence, but a lot of confidence in that Ohio State offense because they dominated the entire football game, especially when the starters were out there. Their starters started to get pulled in the second half as well. But Ohio State, when you look at that offense, what did they need? They needed confidence. They needed confidence. Kyle McCord, first-year starting quarterback for the Buckeyes, he's played all season long, and it seems like he just has not been confident. Well, that big game against Michigan State, obviously Michigan State not having the greatest seasons, Michigan State, usually a better program than what they've been able to do this season, but great teams beat teams how they're supposed to be beat. That's exactly what Ohio State did. They took it to them, and that's a game that they should have won big. They did that, and that's also a game that could spark some confidence in that offense. I think going up next week against Minnesota, we're going to see Ohio State have a lot more confidence on the offensive side of the football. And ultimately, with last week's game against Michigan State, and then on Saturday, your game against Minnesota, those are two games that you need to build confidence up, because guess who's on the horizon? We just talked about them. It's the game, the biggest rivalry in college football, the Michigan Wolverines. And not only that, but that game very well would be and could be for a college football playoff spot.
Oh, I think that game is for sure going to be for a college football playoff spot, because if you take a look at the rest of the teams around the top 5 right now, obviously you've got Florida State undefeated, Washington undefeated, Georgia undefeated, and then Ohio State and Michigan are both undefeated. So this game coming up for Ohio State versus Michigan, the only way it's not to lock in. Whoever wins it is almost guaranteed a spot in the college football playoff. But the only way it's not a game that results in both teams still being alive and still having a chance of being in the college football playoff discussion is, say, Ohio State wins at 49-3 or Michigan wins at 49-3. The only way I would see both of these teams being knocked out of contention, or one of these teams being knocked out of contention for the college football playoff, is one of them gets destroyed in the game. If it's a close game between both teams, say Michigan wins by a field goal, Ohio State wins by a field goal, if it's something along those lines and it's a close game through and through, then I think obviously whoever wins locks themselves into the postseason. And then you've got whoever didn't win. If anybody were to slip up, say Florida State loses in the ACC championship game, or if they lose before the ACC championship game or something along those lines, I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of possibility with how good Ohio State has looked this season and how good Michigan has looked this season. For the loser of that game, if it's close, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to have one of those two teams, whichever loses, to still be in the conversation for being, say, number 4 in the college football playoff rankings and making it into the playoff, just because you take a look in what the committee looks at when it comes to deciding teams that it's borderline if they should make it in or not. You take a look at how good the team has performed so far this season. Is the team deserving of making it in? Their resume, the whole 9 yards. And I think right now, compared to, at least as of right now, especially compared to a team like Florida State, resumes definitely in favor of Ohio State and Michigan. If you compare them to Florida State, if you take a look at the eye test between all three of those teams, if we take a look at Ohio State's defense all season, definitely better than Florida State. If you take a look at how Ohio State's offense has been performing recently, a little bit better than Florida State. I wouldn't say a lot better. And then Michigan, defense, definitely better than Florida State. Offense, definitely better than Florida State. So I'm not saying that it's guaranteed if one of these teams lose, or obviously one of them is going to lose, but whichever team loses, I'm not saying it's guaranteed they're going to make it into the college football playoff. But if it's a close game, we've seen it happen in years past. It's not out of the realm of possibility for a one-loss Big Ten team, being Michigan or Ohio State, that didn't play in their conference championship game, to still be considered and still potentially make it into the college football playoff.
Matt, you make an excellent point there. This is what we saw last season. Obviously, Michigan, they were able to make it into the college football playoff. A lot of expectations, but they got bounced in the first round. Ohio State put up a dogfight against the Georgia Bulldogs as well, as they were able to make it in as the 4th seed. I will say this, though. That is whoever loses, as long as that Michigan-Ohio State game is close here in a couple of weeks, if it is close, if it is a one-score game, that means both teams, one team will practically lock themselves into the college football playoff. The other one will still be on the borderline. I will say this, whoever loses this year in the game, I think will have a harder time making it to the Final Four than a season ago, mainly because of the competition that is surrounding the top 8. And we've talked about the top 8 as well. I mean, Alabama, they're sitting at 8 coming off a big win against Kentucky. They're still very much in the mix of things. You still have Texas in the mix of things. You still have Oregon still in the mix of things. Washington's at 5. All 8 of those teams, and then, of course, the top 4, all 8 of those teams have a legitimate shot at, and a great resume on making it. And I will say this, Ohio State outranks quite a bit of them. I will say that. But at the end of the day, the game, Ohio State, Michigan, whoever loses that one, it's not going to be like remember last year when Ohio State lost, but then they had some help in the conference championships, and we're like, oh yeah, Ohio State should get that 4 spot pretty easy. I don't think it's going to be around that situation. Oh, whoever loses the game will still have a chance to make the college football playoff without a doubt.
They'll need help.
They will need help. You took the words right out of my mouth. They will need help. In fact, they will probably need Georgia to take down Alabama in the SEC championship to eliminate Alabama, because then if Alabama beats Georgia, then you have, okay, now can Georgia make it with 1 loss? Because they made it to the conference championship. They've played some great teams such as Ole Miss, such as Missouri. They have Tennessee this weekend. That's going to be a tough one for the Georgia Bulldogs as well. And then obviously kind of the same situation with Oregon and Washington. You'd probably need Florida State to lose as well. Texas in the Big 12, they're still alive. Whoever loses the game will have a chance of making it, but they're going to need quite a bit of help, and more help than what they needed a season ago. Easiest path to the playoffs is win. If you're Ohio State, easiest way to make it to the college football playoff, beat Michigan. If you're Michigan, easiest way to make it to college football playoff, beat Ohio State. That's the easiest thing, because then you don't have to worry about what help you need in conference championship week.
And yeah, if there's one team right now inside of the top 8 that obviously record-wise they're still in, they still have a chance, but I really don't foresee them making it, it's Texas, just for the main reason that the Big 12, I mean, I talked about it earlier on in the season. I think it was around week 5 or so when I brought it up, but I said the Big 12 is going to destroy itself. And that is from that moment, Oklahoma went from an undefeated team to the team they're at now, their record that they're at now. Oklahoma State, obviously they were fighting and moving their way up the ranks, and then they just got absolutely roundhouse kicked by UCF last week. And then obviously you've got Texas, who's sitting in that top spot, and if they win the Big 12 championship, they still have that argument to make it in, but they've been playing very close against a lot of teams that they should be putting away. You brought it up and you talked about it, Jackson. If your team is as highly ranked and as highly touted as your team is, and you're facing off against a team that's not as good as you, you should be blowing them out. Texas has not been blowing teams out as of recently. So I'm not saying that means Texas should be pushed to the side. There's no chance of them making it into the college football playoff, because if they stay undefeated and win the Big 12 championship game, they'd need help, but they still have a legitimate shot of making it in. But if there's a team that inside the top 8 right now that I would say probably wouldn't be the best fit, and I'm not saying that Texas isn't a good fit for the college football playoff because of the team, I'm just saying with how they've been competing lately, I don't think Texas is at the level of, say, an Alabama, at the level of Oregon, at the level of of Washington, of those teams around their current seeding or better, or around their current ranking or better. With how Texas has been playing the past few weeks, I don't see them in the same conversation as teams like Michigan, teams like Ohio State, Georgia, every team around them. I just don't see Texas in the same conversation when it comes to how good and how dominant the teams have looked. I just don't see Texas in that conversation right now. It could take a week or two for them to absolutely obliterate who they play and change my mind, but past few weeks, they have definitely not passed the eye test.
And Matt, I will say this, Alabama, I've been high on them all season long. You look at their schedule, and yes, they have some closer wins than what you'd want from a team such as Alabama in the top 8. They only beat South Florida by 14. That game was tied heading into the fourth quarter. They only beat Texas A&M by 6. They only beat Arkansas by 3. But you look at what they've been able to do to ranked teams as well, such as Tennessee, beat them by 14. LSU beat them by 14. This is a Alabama team that, Matt, you know this. I've been high on them because there's been a lot of people sleeping on them, and it seems like they fell so far in the rankings early on that we didn't have to worry about Alabama. But here come Alabama. Here comes the Crimson Tide, because Crimson Tide, guess what? This is what they have. They have Chattanooga this week, then they have Auburn. If they win that and punch their ticket to the SEC championship, they have a chance to go up against Georgia. Guess what? If Alabama takes down Georgia and wins out, Alabama will be in the college football playoff, without a doubt in my mind, because of who they've taken down. They've took down Mississippi, Ole Miss. They took down Tennessee. They took down LSU. They have a chance to take down Georgia. Alabama, if they win out and run the table, they start entering that conversation, and they're still very much in it as well. But it seems like there's a lot of people out there that have forgotten about the Crimson Tide, even though they've come out of the bye week, they've been playing their best football, and they're led by Nick Saban. I mean, everybody wanted to throw them to the side at the beginning of the table. Does anybody out there think that Nick Saban, probably in my opinion at least, the greatest college football coach of all time, would not have his team fixed by the end of the year? I mean, obviously, going up and beating Georgia is going to be easier said than done, but at the end of the day, Alabama, they're the 8th spot right now in the college football playoff. That's a team that could drastically increase as long as they keep winning.
And yeah, that's the only unfortunate side for Alabama, is the fact that obviously they're already locked into the SEC championship game against Georgia. That matchup's already been decided. But you take a look at their schedule throughout the remainder of the season. Chattanooga, Auburn. Those are obviously Auburn, the Iron Bowl. That's going to be a closer game, but that's just because that's how Alabama and Auburn play each other. It doesn't matter if Auburn's a below 500 team or if they're number 3 in the country. It doesn't matter what the situation is. Alabama-Auburn should be a close game, and it more than likely will be a close game. But you take a look, they've got Chattanooga next. Their strength of schedule throughout the remainder of the season, obviously taking away the SEC championship game because they've got number 2 Georgia in that one. But you take a look at the strength of schedule that Alabama has in moving themselves further up the list, moving themselves further up the rankings, especially the CFP rankings. It's not that it's impossible, but it's almost impossible for Alabama to move up to, say, 7 or 6 and get themselves a lot closer to that window of making it into the college football playoff, just because they're sitting at 8 right now and they have 2 teams. Chattanooga, obviously, that's like everyone says their cupcake game at this point of the season. A lot of SEC schools, the second to last week of the season, face off against a pretty inferior opponent. It's not every single SEC team, but a majority of them schedule that second to last week of the season against an opponent that they should blow the doors off of. And then they've got Auburn, who is currently 6-4 right now in the season, 3-4 in conference. So when it comes to Alabama's strength of schedule, the potential for them to maybe jump up a few spots, I would say Alabama probably isn't even going to have a chance to whoever loses between Michigan and Ohio State. Michigan, or whoever loses Michigan, Ohio State, that game, I feel like whoever loses is probably going to drop down to 5.
I will say this, Alabama, if they want to jump up at the end of the regular season, they're going to have to win these games convincingly. But the way they make their move is after conference championship week, if they were able to take down Georgia, because then think about it, you have more than likely, unless anything crazy happens, Washington and Oregon squaring off against each other. You have Florida State going up against a worthy opponent as well. In the ACC, you have Texas in the Big 12 again, and all those teams in front of them are going to be playing tremendous teams. And not to mention, if Alabama can take down Georgia, I agree with you, man. In the regular season heading into conference championship week, if Alabama wins out, there's not much they can do to move up from the 8th spot until if they were able to knock off Georgia. If they're able to knock off Georgia, and if everything goes Alabama's way, that's when they can make their strike, and that's when they can make a push for the top 4. Not saying it'll happen. I'm just saying if there is any point in the season where the Crimson Tide are going to make a push for that top 4 spot, it will not be in the regular season. It will be in the conference championship week.
Yeah, the other team that I've got my eye on right now, and they can very well play spoiler, and I don't think they're locked into their conference championship game yet, but I think with the win this upcoming week, they should be locked in. I'm looking at Louisville right now. They can play some spoiler, and you want to talk about the help that, say, Michigan, Ohio State play close, and the loser of that game is on the outside looking in. I'm not saying that Louisville is guaranteed to not make it in if they end up winning the ACC championship game, but it's very possible that, obviously, with Florida State being where they're at ranked right now in the nation, and then Louisville right around, I think 11 is where they are in the CFP, but if you say have Louisville, say they move up to, say, 9th or 10th going into the ACC championship game, assuming they make it into the ACC championship game, because they've got Miami and they've got Kentucky as their next 2 games in the season, so those aren't easy games for anybody inside of the ACC, and obviously Kentucky's an SEC team, but it's a rivalry between Louisville and Kentucky, so that's why they're playing it in the final week of the regular season. But this Louisville Cardinals team could definitely play spoiler, and if they face off against Florida State and take them down in the ACC championship game, that could be the boost that either Michigan or Ohio State needs. Whoever loses that game, that could help one of those two slide their way into a college football playoff spot as well. So there's still a lot of movement that is probably going to happen and that should happen when it comes down to the last few weeks of the season. And then obviously conference championship week, there's a lot of movement that's still to come and that we're still going to see. But the big question is, what's that movement going to be? Because there's a lot of it that can happen. There's a lot of it that is going to happen, but there's a lot of it that can happen that won't happen too.
With that being said, it's time for a break. We'll be back on Sports Now.
At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down. Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir. I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down. Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir. I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down. Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir. I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
welcome me back here to Sports Now. Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington here on the TKDS Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on this Monday. Let's shift our focus away now from college football and let's talk about some NFL football. And Matt, let's start this one off. We're started off with the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals, a tough, heartbreaking defeat yesterday to the Houston Texans, 30-27. A game that, frankly, they should not have won. They came all the way back, and then they lose on a last-second field goal.
Hey, that was my hot take last week, was that C.J. Stroud was going to throw for over 300 yards and that he was going to end up leading the Houston Texans to a win. I called it a hot take because I did not see it playing out that way, but hey, C.J. Stroud continuing to prove why he should be, at least at this point of the season, he should be Offensive Rookie of the Year in the NFL. And I would say, not to say it should be set in stone now, but I'm hearing a lot of people, and I can kind of agree with it. He's, I would say, creeping towards that conversation of MVP as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think C.J. Stroud's certainly starting to creep towards that conversation of MVP. And, Matt, we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show because we have a whole segment planned for that as well, MVP talk as well. But C.J. Stroud, what he's been able to do so far this season has been absolutely incredible for the Houston Texans. And we also have to remember that this is a team that a season ago was picked 2. And no, it wasn't that they traded up in the draft or anything like that. This was the second worst team in the NFL last season. They have come in and they have won a lot of football games. They have played very, 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 very well. And at the end of the day, this is a Houston Texans team that has been absolutely phenomenal all season long. And I don't want to call that this loss for the Cincinnati Bengals is a trap game because Houston, they're a phenomenal team. They're 5-4. They started off the year 0-2. So you look at what they've been able to do in their last 7 games. They've won 5 of their last 7 games. Their 2 losses in that 7-game stretch, both by last-second field goals. The Houston Texans are a legit team, and they are here to stay in the National Football League. And especially yesterday, that opens the eyes across the NFL. So I don't want to say that this game is a trap game for the Cincinnati Bengals, but I will say this. Cincinnati, I think that they got ahead of themselves because remember, it's a short week. They have Baltimore on the road on Thursday Night Football. And that game, if Cincinnati was able to win that game yesterday and avoid the so-called trap game, that game would have been for first place in the division next week. So at the end of the day, that game would have been a huge AFC North matchup. Cincinnati could not hold on against the Houston Texans. Houston Texans, they came in, they exploited, and Cincinnati, you could definitely tell that they were not focused on the Texans and that job at hand. They were focusing more towards Thursday Night Football.
I'll tell you what, I'm now rooting on the Bengals this upcoming Thursday night because if Bengals win, Browns win this upcoming week, I think that puts my Browns in at the number 1 spot in the AFC North. It'll only be by a half a game. I would believe it'd be a half a game to Baltimore. But yeah, I'm definitely rooting as a Browns fan, I'm rooting on the Bengals this week. And obviously rooting on my Browns against the Steelers as well. So 2 pretty big games in the AFC North coming up this week.
Quite a bit coming up in the AFC North this week. It's going to be an absolutely dogfight in the AFC North. And not to mention the Cincinnati Bengals, these next 2 weeks for Cincinnati are going to play dividends to their season. Cincinnati 5-4. They have Baltimore this Thursday night, and then they follow it up, and they will end up playing the Pittsburgh Steelers at home the weekend after Thanksgiving. And Matt, I will say this. Cincinnati, if they lose Thursday night, their hopes at a division title for the 3rd consecutive year will go down the drain. But I will say this. It seems like, at least from the Cincinnati Bengals side of Twitter that I'm on right now, a lot of people panicking, but hey, they're 5-4. Yes, the 1-4 in conference record kind of looks to be an issue, but you got to think at the end of the day, the AFC in general is going to start beating themselves up. And the Cincinnati Bengals being at 5-4, they've been playing some really good football. They've played their best football all season long up until that game. Yes, that game was a tough loss for Cincinnati, but at the end of the day, the Cincinnati Bengals are still very much in the thick of things on making a playoff push. Win or lose this Thursday, this is a Bengals team that could still make that late season push to make it into the playoffs. If they want a chance to win the division, They have got to win Thursday night. But even with the loss and they're 5-5, they're still in a prime position to make a run and go capture a wild card spot.
And yeah, I would assume wild card matchups, if it's two teams that have similar records, it goes down to a head-to-head between the two and who won. I'd say that's probably the only reason Bengals fans are not going crazy, but are not happy about that loss to the Texans, because right now you take a look at the teams that are 5-4 in the AFC. You've got the Buffalo Bills. Bengals hold that tiebreaker over the Buffalo Bills, but then you've got Houston at 5-4 too. So the reason Bengals fans might be up in arms, and the reason I think that you shouldn't be, is because there's still so much football left to be played this year. So you've still got time to maybe get a game or two ahead of Houston. Get a game. You don't even need to get a game or two ahead of Buffalo. You just have to be the same record as the Bills, and you'll make it into the postseason. And there's also, you got the Raiders. They're 5-5. There's a very good likelihood that the Raiders don't stay at around 500 when it comes to their schedule and who they've got to play throughout the remainder of this season. So you talk about the Bengals potentially making a push and still being in the window and still having that opportunity to make a push for a wild card spot. That is definitely not off the table. The Bengals are still a very, very good and competitive team, and it's very likely that this Bengals team still ends up making it, because I was talking about the Raiders' schedule. This is the Raiders' schedule throughout the remainder of the season. On the road against the Dolphins, at home against the Chiefs, at home against the Vikings, at home against the Chargers, on the road against the Chiefs, and then on the road against the Colts, and then at home against the Broncos. I'm not saying that Vegas is going to lose every single one of those games, but it's not looking likely that they're going to stay in around that 500 or be just above 500 with how tough of a schedule they still have to play this year. So that's one of the teams. Obviously, there's still more that you have to keep an eye out for, and we're not going to go in and predict every single game that every team in the wild card hunt has left to go this season, but the Bengals now being tied for that last wild card spot and not holding the tiebreaker over Houston, that shouldn't be a worry, because there's still 8 weeks of football left to be played. That's still 2 months that this Bengals team could end up going 7-1 and be perfectly fine and clear to making it into the postseason. So this Bengals team right now, obviously a close loss and a tough loss to the Houston Texans, but just because you lost in Week 10 doesn't mean the season's over.
No, not at all. And Cincinnati, this is the third straight year that they have started the year 5-4. 2 years ago, they went to the Super Bowl. Last season, they went to the AFC Championship. And Matt, I will say their conference record 1-4 worries me, but let's look at their 1-4 conference record. They beat the Buffalo Bills. That's a team that you very well may need that tiebreaker over. They lost to the Houston Texans. That's a team you may want that tiebreaker over as well. That could come back to hurt. But then outside of that, the Tennessee Titans. I'm sorry, I don't see the Tennessee Titans making a push into the playoffs where that tiebreaker is going to play that big of a factor. And then you have your division losses against Cleveland and Baltimore, not to mention that you can make up for those mistakes early in the season because you play Baltimore again, you play Cleveland again, you play Pittsburgh 2 times. You can still go 4-2 in that division. And this is a Cincinnati team that won the division a season ago at a 3-3 divisional record. So Cincinnati, when you look at their schedule and when you look at that conference record, yes, the 1-4 conference record, yeah, that hurts, but how much is that going to hurt? Because really, the only team I see that hurting against as of right now in the season is the Houston Texans. And I say that because you have a chance to beat Baltimore and tie that series. You have a chance to beat Cleveland and tie that series. Then you still have Pittsburgh 2 more times as well. The Bengals, believe it or not, 5-4, it may seem like they don't control their own destiny, but in a sense, almost every team in the playoff picture control their own destiny. It's only Week 10. You can't just say the season is over because of a Week 10 loss against a very good Houston Texans team. And we're talking about a rookie quarterback that's come in and has taken the NFL by storm. And Matt, you mentioned he should be in the MVP conversation. I completely agree with you, and I know we're getting to that a little bit later as well. But Cincinnati, they have so much to play for ahead of them. They still control their own destiny. Cincinnati should not be panicked whatsoever. But I will say this, if you want to win the division, you have got to take down Baltimore on Thursday night. But I will say this, when Cincinnati should panic, this Baltimore game in division hopes is a must-win game. In playoff hopes, not necessarily. That game, if you lose against Baltimore, that game against Pittsburgh will be your must-win game.
I think more, and I'm not saying that these are the only must-win games that Cincinnati has, but there are 2 games in the next month for this Bengals team that it would definitely help a lot more if you want them as opposed to hurting. Obviously, you want to take down the Ravens and you want to take down the Steelers, but you talk about that out of AFC North tiebreaker scenarios that we could see. We're saying that the Houston scenario is banking on Houston not even winning the AFC South because they are now a legit contender to win the AFC South.
They're only a game back.
That's what I'm saying. They're a game back in Jacksonville. It's not that Jacksonville struggled so far this season, but I'm pretty sure Jacksonville has already lost to Houston once on the year. The Bengals play against Jacksonville on December 4th. Like I said, I'm not saying that it's guaranteed that Houston is going to be the team on top of the AFC South and that, yeah, Houston ended up winning against the Jaguars 37-17 earlier on in the season. They face off against them not this upcoming week, but the following week. So I'm not saying that it's guaranteed that Houston is going to win the AFC South and Jacksonville is going to drop down, but if you're the Bengals, you have to have that scenario in mind. So talking about big wins against out of AFC North teams, that game against Jacksonville and then the game following against the Colts, those are some pretty big games that the Bengals are going to want to win because obviously it's playing out in a scenario where the Texans win the AFC South. But if that ends up happening and that ends up being the case, the Bengals are going to have that tiebreaker win over both teams that could potentially take their wild card spot coming from the AFC South because the Colts are also still in the conversation for a potential wild card team as well, maybe even winning the AFC South themselves. So when it comes down to, obviously, in-division games are a little bit more important, but if you're looking outside of division matchups that you've got throughout the remainder of the season, Jacksonville is a must-win game for the Bengals. Game against Indy is a must-win game for the Bengals because it will hold the tiebreaker between both of those two teams if we see their regular season records tie at the end of the regular season.
And Matt, look at it this way. Cincinnati, after what they've gone through with the Joe Burrow calf injury, starting the season 1-3, losing that game to the Houston Texans, and one game I kind of want to compare this game to is, I guess what I'm trying to say, is remember back in 2021 when Cincinnati went on the road to play the New York Jets, a game that they should have won. They lost to Mike White. I'm not saying that the Houston Texans are the New York Jets of 2 years ago. The Houston Texans are a very good football team. C.J. Stroud is one of the best quarterbacks in the National Football League right now, and you could probably even make an argument that he's having the best season from any other NFL quarterback as well. I mean, just look at the numbers, but you look at what Houston does, this is a very, very, very good Houston Texans squad. Cincinnati, that's a deflating loss, but we saw this in 2021, and then guess what? They lost to Cleveland the next week. They dropped to 5-4, and it seems like this is the midpoint of the season. Cincinnati last year, it happened when they lost to the Cleveland Browns when they dropped to 3-4. It seems like right around the midpoint of the season over the last couple of years, Cincinnati always has a loss that sticks out more than some of their other losses, and it ruffles some of the NFL feathers. You will see a lot of fans starting to freak out. You're going to see a lot of media personnel to freak out as well. But then what does Cincinnati do in the second half of the season? We talk about the second half of the season, the year that they went to the Super Bowl. They finished, I believe it was 11-2 up until that Super Bowl loss. In last season, they went on a 12-game winning streak. Cincinnati, they're a second-half football team. We're entering the second half of the season. They know that these are must-win games, and obviously it's a different feel this season from the Bengals squad. I will say that, but one thing that we can't forget about is that the Bengals are just coming off a 4-game winning streak when they were playing their best football. They were playing their best football in that 4-game winning streak, and they took down some of the top teams in the NFL. I'll still go out there and say that Buffalo and the Bills are still one of the top teams in the NFL. Even though with all their offensive woes this season, I will still go out there and make an argument that Buffalo is still Buffalo. You took down the San Francisco 49ers. Yes, they were struggling before the bye week. They were without Deebo Samuel, but guess what? It's still the San Francisco 49ers. You took down the Seattle Seahawks, and Matt, we talked about how hard the Seattle Seahawks have been this season. They gave Cleveland fits as well. The Seattle Seahawks, that's a playoff team in the NFC as well. Cincinnati, they took down 3 caliber playoff teams in that 4-game winning streak when they were playing their best football. One loss against the Texans does not represent who they are, not to mention how they came back in the second half of that game, in a game that ultimately they should have won, and we're getting to that here in the next hour. A game that they ultimately should have won, they let slip through their fingers. Cincinnati's going to come out on Thursday night. They're going to look to avenge this loss. They're going to be just fine. I will say this, though, maybe a little bit of a spoiler alert. Baltimore, with that loss, they're going to be angry. Spoiler alert on my game pick. I do think Baltimore wins on Thursday night, though.
Yeah, it's going to be a tale of 2 teams on short weeks not happy with how they lost.
It's going to be a physical game. It's going to be fun to watch.
They're not going to be happy at all with how they lost, and especially with the fact that both of those teams are on the losing end of the NFL record-setting game-winning field goal week now with what happened last week, and both Baltimore and Cincinnati being on the receiving ends of losses in that week. So it's definitely going to be a fun Thursday night football game. And like you mentioned, the fact that both of these teams lost on last-second field goals. So they are both going to be very, very mad about that. And they're going to want to rip each other's heads off this upcoming Thursday. So
it's going to be a lot better.
It's going to be a fun Thursday night football
It's going to be a lot better of a game than what we saw last Thursday night between the Bears and the Panthers.
I don't get why that was a Thursday night football game.
Time for break. Hour 2 coming up when we'll return. When we return to start hour number 2, we will go back and we will break down the game against Cincinnati Bengals and the Houston Texans. And I will say this, maybe a bit of a spoiler alert. Yes, Tyler Boyd, he dropped the game-winning touchdown pass, but, Matt, what do we say? You win as a team, you lose as a team. There were a lot more things that went wrong yesterday for the Bengals. It does not go down to just Tyler Boyd. That's coming up when we return.
Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Hour number 2 of this 2-hour show. We are live until 6. Special announcement as well at the very end of the show. Jackson Lightcap, Matthew Pennington. We're talking Cincinnati Bengals football, how they should not be worried after that loss against the Houston Texans. And now let's go back and let's go over the loss against the Houston Texans. Cincinnati, they were trailing almost the entire game after they scored the opening drive touchdown. Since then, it was all Houston. We saw Cincinnati start to claw their way back into that one. They had an interception with 3 minutes to go. They were able to get the ball back as well, march the ball down the field. They kicked a field goal to tie it up before Houston nailed a game-winning field goal. And the last offensive drive of the game for Cincinnati, Tyler Boyd had a drop in the end zone that would have been a touchdown, and that would have forced Houston to march the football down the field to score a touchdown instead of kick a field goal to win. And I will say this, that's a catch that you have to come up with. There's no excuses there. And, you know, Tyler Boyd, he's going to own up to it. He'll be the first one to tell you that he should have had that football. If you saw how he was acting at the end of that game, you knew that he felt bad. But it's not fair to throw all the blame of the loss onto Tyler Boyd, because here's another situation. You have a defense that allowed 544 total yards yesterday. 544 total yards yesterday. That is atrocious. And I don't mean to be, I know that's pretty blunt or whatnot, but it's atrocious. That is atrocious. If you give up 544 yards and expect to win, then your priorities are completely at the wrong side, you know? And then, of course, Joe Burrow, fourth quarter, 2 interceptions in that fourth quarter. Both times when the Bengals had the ball, they were marching the ball downfield. Both of them happening in the red zone, including one in the end zone as well. So you have 2 turnovers that took points away from Cincinnati where they could have scored and gone up. And then you have the end of the first half where your final 6 possessions, 5 of them ended in 3 and outs, and your 6th one was a kneel down. Cincinnati, they had 25 yards after that opening drive touchdown to end the first half. So you have the offense that stalls out. You have Burrow's 2 interceptions. You have a defense that allows 544 yards. Yes, Cincinnati, it amazes me. And it truly amazes me that Cincinnati had a chance to win that football game late in the game. So since they had a chance, you cannot put all the blame on Tyler Boyd for dropping that touchdown pass, because who's not to mention that even if he did catch it, Houston would have been able to march the football down the field, and instead of kicking a field goal, they would have scored the touchdown to win it. You know, there's so many what-ifs in that game, and it was a game that, frankly, Cincinnati, they played awful. They played terrible. Defense was awful. Offense didn't wake up till the fourth quarter. It was a horrific showing. It was absolutely terrible showing, and when it came down to it, they had a chance to win. They couldn't do it. Cincinnati, that was a game that they did not deserve to win. That was a game that they deserved to lose, and that they only lost by 3 on a last-second field goal, that blows my mind. That completely blows my mind. And we talk about why Cincinnati should not panic. Well, guess what? It's a fluke game. We see what that defense has been able to do all season long. They don't allow 544 yards. They were bad against Tennessee, and they were bad against Baltimore, but outside of that, they, over the last couple weeks on this winning streak, Cincinnati's defense has been a very tough defense to play against. And obviously, Joe Burrow, since he's been healthy, he hasn't thrown many picks. Even when he was hurt, he didn't throw many interceptions through the season as well. So, obviously, a big win for the Texans. That's a very good football team, but also a game that Cincinnati, I don't want to call it a fluke game for them, because at least I hope it's not a fluke game for them. But at the end of the day, that's a game that they made too many mistakes to win, and they should have lost that game by 20 or more points. They lost by 3. So Cincinnati, it's obvious they did not play their best football game. They lost by 3 points to a very good Texans team. That's another reason why Bengal fans out there, the media out there, should be deep breath, realize they played awful. They played horrific. That hasn't been a common trend on this winning streak, and they still only lost by 3. They still had a chance to win. They're going to be okay.
And yeah, I would say the main focal point as to why the Bengals lost this game, and obviously you take a look at the score, and it kind of shows itself that, yeah, this is kind of the reason the Bengals lost, was the roughly 30 to 40 total yards gained on offense from midway through the first quarter to midway through the third quarter. That's a full half of football where your team is only putting up 30 to 40 total yards of offense. If there's any glaring issue and any glaring reason why a team lost a football game, especially with the fact that they only lost by 3 points, 30 to 40 yards, I think it was around 32 to 33 yards in that span of time. That's the reason the Bengals lost this football game. Obviously, you take a look at how it played out, and Tyler Boyd didn't catch that pass into the end zone, and you might think that, oh, if he catches that, it would have been ball game, we would have won. Like you mentioned, we saw what C.J. Stroud did against the Buccaneers last week, or not last week, but 2 weeks ago. It wouldn't have been safe to say that if Tyler Boyd caught that pass and scored the touchdown, it was guaranteed Cincinnati was going to win the football game, especially with how fast and how efficient the Texans were at moving the football down the field. They would have had probably, with where Noah Brown went down, I want to see exactly where the field goal was in that fourth quarter. It was a 38-yard field goal, so that would have put them at the 21-yard line. They would have used that timeout, that last timeout they had after that catch by Noah Brown. They would have had, 12, 15 seconds left with only 21 yards left to go to get into the end zone. We saw what C.J. Stroud did against the Buccaneers. It's safe to say it wouldn't have been guaranteed that he would have scored himself. He would have scored another touchdown for Houston, but he's already proven he's been able to do it as a rookie. So saying that the game and the only reason that the Bengals lost that game was because of that drop pass by Tyler Boyd, if you're saying that's the only reason the Bengals lost that football game, you weren't paying attention for a majority of the game, because that almost full 2 quarters of football where the Bengals could not move the football at all, that's where the Bengals lost this football game.
Yeah, Cincinnati, they weren't able to get anything going on offense. And I mentioned the 2 fourth-quarter interceptions from Joe Burrow. It wasn't the Bengals' day. As simple as that. And Cincinnati, they were lucky that they were only down by 3 in the locker room, because they very well could have been down 27-7. And they very well could have lost that game 40-17. That was a game that should not have been close. And Cincinnati kept it close and gave themselves a chance to win. You can't get upset because of the final play, offensive play of the game. You have to get upset about the other factors around. The defense struggled. Everybody on the defense struggled. And now a lot of Bengal fans, they're shifting their focus to Thursday night big game against the Ravens. Cincinnati, injuries are starting to pile up as well. Cincinnati, they were without T. Higgins and they were without Sam Hubbard yesterday. They are both questionable. It's looking like the reports I've seen, T. Higgins may not play on Thursday. And they also lost Trey Hendrickson as well with a hyperextended knee. He's week to week.
And yeah, that's going to be the biggest issue for the fact that this game is being played on Thursday for the Bengals, is it's a short week. You don't have as much time to recover. You don't have as much time to get yourself ready for the game. But the other good thing that it does is if a player is inactive and they are expected to possibly play on that Thursday game, but they're not quite ready to play, it's just going to give them more time to get ready for the game following up. So for the Bengals, it's going to be the game against the Steelers. So you talk about, obviously, players being questionable. Higgins might return. Hendrickson, it's questionable whether or not, like you said, he's week to week with that injury. So
more than likely he will be missing Thursday night, and more than likely Higgins will be missing Thursday night. I haven't seen any updates on Sam Hubbard, though.
That'll be I say good thing, because obviously those are the type of playmakers that you'd want to have on the field if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, but it's also another, I would say, blessing in disguise for the Bengals, the fact that they're on this short week, because that's just going to give players like Hendrickson, that's going to give players like Higgins a lot of extra time. They're going to have a few more days to recover, to get better, and be better than ever if they were, say, up to Sunday, they were working out training, or they were working out going to practices. Not saying that they would have re-injured themselves or whatever, but when you're questionable and you maybe start on that Sunday and it might not have been a good idea to do it, you should have waited. It helps to have a Thursday game, because you're going to have less time to get yourself ready to go when you're not ready to go fully and potentially re-injuring. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Higgins if he were to start in this game on Thursday, but you've seen it happen a few different times with players. They decide that they're questionable to return. They're questionable to return pretty much the whole week. At the last minute, they're given the green light, and then they're questionable to return the very next week. So, like I said, I'm not saying, obviously, like I said, you'd want to have a player like T. Higgins, you'd want to have a player like Hendrickson ready to go against the Baltimore Ravens coming up this Thursday, but it also can be seen, especially if the Bengals win, it will 100% be seen as a blessing in disguise because you've got those two players that are big playmakers. You still come off of a win against a very good Ravens team, and those players have more time to recover to get ready for the Steelers the upcoming week. So, obviously, me saying it's a blessing in disguise comes with a Bengals win this upcoming Thursday, but when it comes down to those players' health and their availability for the remainder of the season, I still think no matter what happens on Thursday, it might be a little bit of a blessing in disguise having the short week because the players aren't going to be rushing themselves to get back onto the football field to potentially hurt themselves again.
Matt, without those key players in the game Thursday night for Cincinnati, is this still a game that Cincinnati can win?
I think it is. For the Bengals, I think right now with how Joe Burrow has been playing the past few weeks, if he's on the football field, the team of Cincinnati has a chance to win. But that's just because that's how good Joe Burrow is as a player. The defensive side, obviously, there's a really good chance that they're going to struggle, especially, as you mentioned, Hubbard probably not going to play, Hendrickson probably not going to play. That's a majority of the pass rush for this Bengals team. So Lamar Jackson,
basically all the pass rush.
yeah, it's a majority. Well, I say majority because you're still going to have players on the end of the D tackle position still trying to get to Lamar Jackson, but the playmakers here, we'll frame it like this. That's your playmakers on the defensive line gone for the week. So when it comes down to getting pressure to Lamar Jackson, it's definitely not going to be at the level that you would want it to be for the Bengals. And if there's one quarterback right now in the NFL you want to get as much pressure on, I mean, we saw how the Browns were able to pressure Lamar Jackson and got quite a few sacks in that game against Baltimore yesterday. So if you want to if there's a player right now, there's a few different players that come to mind, but if there's a player that you want to get pressure on and you don't want to let sit in the pocket and throw the football around, and then if he finds an opening to escape the pocket, it's Lamar Jackson. You want to have your defensive ends crash in. You want to be able to contain him and not allow him to go anywhere, to do anything. So I think that's definitely going to be something that hurts this Bengals team. But like I said, with Joe Burrow out on the football field, with how good he has been these past few weeks, I mean, that throw to Jamar Chase, perfection. There's no other way of putting it. That pass was beautiful. Thrown on a rope, couldn't have put it any better, couldn't have put it in a better spot. If he's out on that football field, I think the Bengals have a chance against the Ravens.
I think they have a chance. I don't think they win this game, though. That's a little bit of a different story. And yes, we're making our game picks as well. But I think Cincinnati, they have a chance. But Baltimore, right now, this is their division. And it's their division to lose. They're going to come out at home on Thursday night. I just don't foresee them dropping 2 straight games at home. This is a game Cincinnati can win. Do I think they will? That is on the other spectrum. I don't think they do.
I think the other reason that I'm not as confident in the Bengals winning this game against the Ravens is because the Ravens just came off of a crushing defeat
That's what I'm
to the
thinking.
Cleveland
And it's
Browns.
their division to lose. The AFC North right now is their division to lose. They had a 2-game lead or a game and a half lead on everybody entering this week. They lose to Cleveland. What would a loss do for the Cincinnati? What would a loss do for the Baltimore Ravens if they lost to the Cincinnati Bengals? It would hurt them. It would hurt them in the division standings. It would hurt them in the AFC standings. That's why I don't think it happens. It's going to be one of those situations as I guess we'll never know what would happen. I think Baltimore is going to take this one. We'll just have to wait and see. Thursday Night Football, though, it will be a good one. Time for a break. We'll be back.
Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
We welcome you back here to the TKDS Sports Network and Sports Now. Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington. And we just got done talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. Now let's go in and let's start talking about the winning team in the state of Ohio, the Cleveland Browns. We talked about the Baltimore Ravens. That's who Cincinnati plays on Thursday night. And the Cleveland Browns with a big come-from-behind victory. They were down 14-0 in a blink of an eye. Within the first 4.5 minutes of the game, they were down 14-0. Second throw of the game from Deshaun Watson was a pick six. But hey, that Cleveland defense stepped up when they needed them to. They got a pick six of their own, and it was a last-second field goal from the Cleveland Browns to win a thriller in Baltimore at M&T Bank Stadium, 33-31.
I'll tell you what, after that first 5 minutes of the game, I was like, well, this is kind of how I saw this going. I thought from that moment on, I thought from that first few minutes, I was like, oh boy, this is about to be bad. But the Cleveland Browns came in, decided to start playing some pretty good football in that second half. And the reason I say start playing some pretty good football in that second half is I'm pretty sure that second half is the Deshaun Watson that the Browns spent as much money as they did on. I believe it was 14 for 14, 130 to 150 yards, a touchdown in that second half. Obviously, only one touchdown. You might think, hey, that wasn't that good. He also had quite a few runs in that second half, too. So when it comes down to how effective the team was, also Watson with that 16-yard run in that second half, that was to move him near/in field goal range for Hopkins. So we saw especially in that second half, we saw the Deshaun Watson that the Browns decided to go out and get and decided to pay a ton of money to. So I was happy to see, especially in that second half, the type of performance that Deshaun Watson was having. The big question I've got, though, is that defense going to be able to step up and stop those explosive plays? Because that's really been the issue for the Browns defense for a majority of the season. Obviously, they stepped up pretty big. At times it was needed. But those explosive plays, that's what kills me as a Browns fan. Watching a pass out into the flat / a screen to Keaton Mitchell go 35 yards to the house for a touchdown on a play that should have maybe gained 5 to 10 yards, maybe should have got a first down. It went to the house. And then Odell Beckham Jr. looking like rookie Odell Beckham Jr. and taking a slant 60 or so yards into the end zone for a touchdown. If the Browns can find a way to stop those explosive plays, I think this Browns defense is going to solidify themselves as the number one defense in the NFL. The question is going to be, are they going to be able to stop are they going to be able to stop those explosive plays? Because if not, this Bengals defense is going to be pretty good, but they're definitely not going to be the best in the NFL. If they can stop those explosive plays, this Browns defense can solidify itself as the top defense in the NFL. The only question is going to be, will the Browns defense do it? Will they be able to stop those explosive plays?
And Matt, I will say this, the biggest takeaway from that Cleveland Browns victory from yesterday that I will go out and say, how many times on this show have we said, once Cleveland's offense gets going and stays consistent, that offense and this team is going to be legit. And now, obviously, it's just one game that we started to see this offense get going from the Cleveland Browns. But, Matt, you take a look at how Deshaun Watson looked. You mentioned the stats in the second half. Deshaun Watson looked like he was the man for the Cleveland Browns and looked like he is the man at quarterback for the Cleveland Browns yesterday. He looks like he is that guy that they paid all that money to be their quarterback over the next 5 years or so. Deshaun Watson looked phenomenal. When he's playing great, that whole offense looks phenomenal. And we talked about it. If Cleveland could start to fix some of the inconsistencies on the offensive side of the football, that is one of the best teams in the National Football League. That is a team that could compete with the Kansas City Chiefs. That is a team that could obviously beat the Baltimore Ravens. That is a team that could beat any team in the league. But once that offense finds consistency, watch out, because the Browns, they got the league on notice.
And yeah, that's one thing that I also liked seeing when it came down to the Browns play yesterday. I loved seeing Amari Cooper get pretty involved in the offense. 6 catches, 98 yards, didn't have a touchdown. But I also loved seeing Elijah Moore get involved with that offense. We just picked him up from the Jets last offseason. He's been kind of a utility piece when it comes to the offense. He's used here and there, but not everywhere. 5 catches, 44 yards, and a touchdown for the Cleveland Browns against Baltimore. Also, there were a few, I think there was at least 1 or 2 passes where David Njoku didn't come down with the ball, but still, he had a pretty good day too. 6 catches, 58 yards. So this Browns team, especially on the offensive side, there is one thing that this Browns team I absolutely love that they've stuck with, and I've loved that they've been able to continue this kind of production without Nick Chubb. Jerome Ford, 17 carries, 107 yards. Kareem Hunt, 10 carries, 32 yards and a touchdown. And then Deshaun Watson, 8 carries for 37 yards. I like that this Browns offense is sticking with their roots, sticking with what they're good at. They're good at running the football. They've proven it year in and year out. And I like that just because Nick Chubb isn't going to be with the team for the rest of the season due to that injury he had against the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 2, they're not shying away from running the football just because they don't have their talented back in the backfield. I love that the Browns are sticking with running the football. I love that it's still working at the level it's able to work on. I mean, Jerome Ford averaged almost 6.3 yards per carry yesterday. So the fact that the Browns have continued to run the football efficiently, the fact that they haven't shied away and tried to throw the football more, I absolutely love that the Browns are sticking with that game plan.
Matt, I will go out and say this. Amari Cooper, you mentioned that he had a terrific game yesterday, 98 yards receiving. And look at his numbers so far this season. He's got 41 catches going for 715 yards, only 2 touchdowns. But look how he's been able to be implemented in that offensive scheme ever since Deshaun Watson has come back. I mean, when you look at what Amari Cooper has been able to do so far this season, especially with Deshaun Watson at his quarterback, look at the last couple of games, for example. 6 catches, 98 yards against the Ravens. The Cardinals, 5 catches for 139. And even the week before that against the Seahawks, 6 catches for 89 yards. I believe that was still a game that P.J. Walker started for the Cleveland Browns. But this Browns offense thrives when Amari Cooper has the ball in his hands, when he's having big games. And he's having a lot of big games, especially compared to some of the middle of the stages where they had DTR and P.J. Walker starting, such as, the first game against the Ravens, 1 catch, 16 yards, 49ers, 4 catches, 108 yards. The 108 yards sound great, but the 4 catches, you'd like to get him a little bit more involved. The Colts, 2 catches for 22 yards. The Cleveland Browns, this offense is a different offense, not just when Deshaun Watson is firing on all cylinders, but also when Amari Cooper is firing on all cylinders as well. And without Nick Chubb, the loss of Nick Chubb, who was averaging 6.1 yards per carry through the 1.5 games that he was able to play this season, with the loss of him, Jerome Ford's been able to step up, but obviously you need to start spreading the wealth around. You need to start spreading the wealth around because obviously Jerome Ford is not going to be able to step into Nick Chubb's shoes and take completely over and do exactly what Nick Chubb is doing. He's taken over. He's averaging 4.1 yards per carry, exactly what you want from Jerome Ford. We've seen some glimpses of him absolutely going berserk. That's exactly what you want from him. But you look at what he's doing now, great season. You look at what Nick Chubb was doing, a better season, which is hard to believe. So obviously, you still need other players just than Jerome Ford to fill the absence of Nick Chubb. And it seems like the Browns have started to try to do that by throwing the football a little bit more, getting the ball in the hands of Amari Cooper.
And I also love, I mean, I was a little bit upset when we couldn't initially bring him back this past season, but I'm loving Kareem Hunt in this Browns offense. I mean, you talk about players to step up. Kareem Hunt, obviously, when it comes to average yards, he's not up there with the likes of what Nick Chubb was able to do before he got hurt and with what Jerome Ford has been able to do so far this season. But Kareem Hunt brings something to the table that obviously Jerome Ford can do, but he doesn't do it as well. It seems like Kareem Hunt never wants to go. He doesn't want to get his jersey dirty, it seems like. He never wants to go to the ground. He never wants to get tackled. Obviously, Jerome Ford has those kinds of aspects, and we've seen it a few times. But when it comes down to the overall drive and the fight, I would say Kareem Hunt's a little bit, and that's why we've seen him be the more red zone running back for the Cleveland Browns. We've seen explosive home run hitting runs from Jerome Ford here, there, and everywhere. It's pretty much been the case. I mean, there was a play that yesterday he should have maybe gained 3 or 4 yards. He decided to hit the circle button, spun off the pile, and gained about 30 or 40 yards on that, 20 to 30, maybe 40 yards on that carry.
The circle button is the B button if you play Xbox.
If you play circle B, whichever one you want to call it. But
Matt and I were PlayStation guys.
He hit that circle button and put everybody in a blender and kept running after that. But then that's the type of thing you don't get from Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt's more of a downhill, punishing running back who will not go down. He'll run you over. He'll jump over you if he has to. But he's not I'm going to run for 50 to 60 yards on this carry. I'm going to keep churning through the defense and keep running it up the middle. And I kind of like that 1-2 punch and that 1-2 combo. And Nick Chubb can kind of Nick Chubb is pretty much the same when it comes down to his attributes. He's obviously got that tough running style where he will run you over if you're not setting your feet and you're not ready to tackle him. So Chubb does bring that to the table. Obviously, Jerome, you pretty much in the NFL, if you're a halfback and you can't run somebody over, or if you can't blow by somebody or do something along those lines, you're not going to be playing as a halfback in the NFL for too much longer. But when it comes down to the scheme and the level of play, like I said, I just love that the Browns, without having Chubb, I love that they keep going to the ground game, because in the NFL especially, you can't become a one-dimensional team. Otherwise, the defense that you're playing against is eventually going to key in on it, and you're not going to be able to do a single thing. And that's why I love that the Browns, without their home run hitter, Nick Chubb, and without their I would say before he got hurt, obviously this season before he got hurt, he was the number 1 back in the NFL. It's nice seeing the Browns continue to try to go with that style of play, running the football as much as they are, continuing to try to keep it on the ground as many times as they can without having a player at the caliber of Nick Chubb in that backfield.
With that being said, it's time for a break. When we return, we will take a look at the entire AFC. That's all coming up next on Sports Now.
Come on, guys, let's call Daddy. Hi, Daddy.
Hi!
How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe.
And I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon. Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Let's call Daddy. Hi, Daddy.
Hi!
How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe.
And I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon. Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
We welcome you back here, Sports Now. Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington. And let's talk about the entire AFC and also the entire NFL. We're going to talk about the AFC mainly for the fact that that's what conference both teams in Ohio are, the Browns and the Bengals. And you look at the AFC, Matt, the AFC is absolutely stacked. Obviously, if the season were to end today, your number one seed would be the Kansas City Chiefs, 7-2, Ravens in second at 7-3. Jags in third, 6-3, and the Dolphins in fourth at 6-3. And then you look at some of the wild card teams. Right now, it would be the Steelers, Browns, they're 6-3, Texans at 5-4, and on the bubble, Cincinnati, Buffalo, Indianapolis, Las Vegas Raiders, Los Angeles Chargers, and then the Jets. And all of those teams that I just mentioned, they're either at or one game below or one game above 500. When you go down, there are 16 teams in the AFC. And how about this, Matt? This is, how about this? Out of the 16 teams in the AFC, 13 of those teams are one game below 500 or better entering week 11.
It's crazy.
I mean, that's insane. 13 of the 16 teams are one game below 500 or better.
Goes to show how, as you mentioned, how tough the AFC is as a whole.
If you want to include 500 or better, 11 of those 16 teams are 500 or better. And then 9 of those 16 teams are above 500. It's crazy. The AFC has been absolutely insane this season. And I will say this, as the season goes on, the AFC, they're going to start beating up on each other. But the question is, who's going to beat up on who? That's really the question. A lot of great games in the AFC, and this playoff picture, it's going to be dramatic all the way to the finish.
And yeah, I just went ahead and took a look at the NFC. The NFC right now, 6 teams officially above 500. And then you've got, if you want to go 500 or better, you've got the Saints to make it 7. But that's it. There's only 7 teams inside of the NFC that are in that conversation for at least 500 or better. You take a look, you take the AFC North and you take the AFC South. They've already got 7 teams at or above 500 in the AFC North and the AFC South. And that doesn't even include the Dolphins, the Bills, the Raiders, and the Chiefs at around that 500 or better mark. So the AFC is definitely the more powerhouse conference, if you want to say, between the two. And you take a look at the teams inside of the AFC, you've got the Chiefs, you got the Ravens, Jaguars, they've looked on and off. You've got the Dolphins who, if the offense is playing good, can drop 40 points on anybody. You've got the Bills playing phenomenal football. I haven't mentioned anybody else in the AFC North, but I'm just going to say the entire AFC North. I mean, I mentioned the Ravens, but I didn't mention anybody else. But it's safe to say the entire AFC North. It just goes to show how tough the AFC is and how tough it's going to be a team inside of the AFC and make it into the postseason this year. When you've got that many teams fighting and that many teams continuing to put up a fight at this point in the season, I'm not saying that at this point of the season you're going to start seeing those teams give up. But at this point of the season, you see those, I'd say, 3 to 6 teams inside of the AFC and the NFC that are like, all right, yeah, we really do not have a shot at making the postseason. Let's start winding down. We're not going to tank for a number 1 overall pick, but we're definitely not going to try to win every single football game we're playing. So when you take a look at the AFC, and obviously you've got Broncos versus Bills coming up tonight, so there's still a chance that the Bills could move to 6-4 They could end up being 5-5. The Broncos could jump to one game below 500 themselves. So it just goes to show how tough. It just goes to show how tough the AFC is when you've got 3 teams in the entire AFC, and that can change to 2 tonight. 3 teams have 3 or less wins at this point of the season. Only 3 teams.
And Matt, I will say this. Look at the number 1 seed, which is Kansas City, all the way down to the number 9 seed, the Buffalo Bills. As of right now, not including tonight's game, they're from the 1 seed, so home field advantage in the playoffs, down to the 9 seed, out of the playoffs completely by 2 spots. It is a 2-game difference. 2-game difference. So within 2 weeks, we could see the Buffalo Bills have the 1 seed and Kansas City be out of the playoffs. This playoff picture is going to be absolutely wild to the finish. And in fact, you want to go farther down the list, go all the way to, let's say, the 11 seed, the Las Vegas Raiders. That's a 2.5 game difference. And it's a half game because the Colts and the Raiders have not had their bye week. It goes to speak dividends on how great this AFC is. The American Football Conference this season in the National Football League is the most stacked I think that it's ever been. Matt, that leads me into my next question. When you look at the 7 teams who will be going and who will be representing into the playoffs, who do you think?
Right now,
Mid-season predictions.
Mid-season predictions for me. Right now, I would say the teams that I think in the AFC that should make it in / are going to make it in, I think the Chiefs are going to win. I think they're going to win the AFC West, and that's how they're going to guarantee themselves into the postseason. And this is where it gets tough. Pretty much every other division is where it gets tough on who I see winning it. I think Buffalo's going to win the AFC East. I think with how the teams are playing right now, Houston is going to win the AFC South. I'm going to have to flip a coin for the AFC North, to be completely honest with you. It's so up in the air for every single team inside of the AFC North. I mean, you've got a 1.5 game split between every single team, and that can be cut to pretty much nothing next week. If the Bengals beat the Ravens, if the Browns beat the Steelers, it's going to be between top and bottom. I'm pretty sure if it doesn't matter if Steelers win or if Browns win. And then if the Bengals beat the Ravens, I'm just doing the math in my head, 7-4, it'd be 7-4, I'm trying to do the math, 7-4, 7-3, Bengals 6-4. It would be from top to bottom, 1 game difference between first and fourth in the AFC North. I was just trying to do the math, making sure I was right. I think I'm right. Don't quote me on whether or not I'm right or not. I think it would be 1 game split between 1 and 4th. So for the AFC North, I have absolutely no idea who's going to win it.
The AFC North stacked, to say the least. Every team's over 500 in the AFC North.
Here's my prediction.
13, I beg your pardon, 13 combined losses. In the AFC North, there are 13 combined losses. 6 of them were against a division opponent. 6. The AFC North this season has been absolutely insane. And now, Matt, I'm going to go back to I'll answer the question I just asked you a few minutes ago, and that leads me to, I think I'm going to go with the Chiefs to win the NFC West, or I beg your pardon, the AFC West. It's a Monday. That's my excuse for every Monday.
He's tired.
It's a Monday.
Just don't say it tomorrow. Don't say that it's Monday tomorrow. Then everyone's going to think you're crazy.
Then I got to go with the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are going to win the AFC West. When you look at the AFC North, I'm going to go out and I'm going to say the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens have just been dominant this season. Baltimore, I think that they're going to end up edging out the North. I think that ultimately, I think it's the Ravens' year this season. The AFC East, I am going to give Buffalo that over Miami. We see what Miami has done against teams that are better than 500. They got a tough schedule upcoming. Give me Buffalo over the Miami Dolphins. In the South, you can make a debate because the Jacksonville Jaguars have been playing very good football lately outside of yesterday's loss against San Francisco 49ers. But outside of that loss, they've played some really good football, but so have the Texans. And I mentioned earlier in the show, the Texans in their last 7 games have won 5 of their last 7. Their 2 losses, they lost by a field goal. And you look at the upcoming schedule, Houston, they have Arizona, Jacksonville, Denver, New York, Tennessee, Cleveland, Tennessee again, Indianapolis. And then you look at what Jacksonville has coming up. They have a lot tougher of a schedule. They have Tennessee, Houston, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Baltimore, Tampa Bay, Carolina, Tennessee. I think that those schedules catch up with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacksonville, that's a great team, but I am going to give Houston. I think that they do end up winning the AFC South, and I say that because they have the easier schedule upcoming. The wild card teams that I'm going to have to give props to, I like what the Dolphins are doing. I think that the Dolphins are going to be in that mix. I think that the Jaguars are going to be in that mix. And hey, that 7th spot, it's going to be tough. Browns, Bengals, they're in that mix. The AFC is just stacked this season. The question is there going to be a team that falls off this year?
The wild card teams, because I didn't get to those, I think the AFC North is probably going to come down. I would say it's probably going to come down to, I'm not saying that the Bengals are completely out of it.
I think it's going to come down to that Week 18 matchup between Cincinnati and Cleveland. Well, I like Cleveland too. I think Cleveland will be in the mix of things for a while as well. They have an easier schedule coming up.
I think to win the AFC North, it's going to come down to Browns-Ravens. I think that
I agree.
I think that the two teams that have the best shot as of right now,
unless Cincinnati wins on Thursday night, then they can enter that picture
then
again.
It's anybody's ball game. That is anybody's question, and it's anybody's chance to win the AFC North. But if Baltimore takes down Cincy this Thursday, I think it's up in the air between both the Browns and the Ravens, just because I'm pretty sure the Ravens also have a fairly tough schedule throughout the remainder of the season. And then you take a look at the Browns. They have a little bit of an easier schedule. I'll take a look now. The schedule for the Ravens throughout the remainder of the season is at home against the Bengals, on the road against the Chargers, at home against the Rams, on the road against the Jags, and then the 49ers, at home against Miami, at home against the Steelers. So it's not an easy schedule for the Baltimore Ravens. For the Cleveland Browns, the remainder of their schedule, they've got home game against the Steelers, on the road against the Broncos, and then the Rams, at home against the Jaguars, at home against the Bears, on the road against the Texans, at home against the Jets, on the road against the Bengals. I think the Browns have a little bit of an easier schedule as opposed to the Baltimore Ravens throughout the remainder of this season. So I think AFC North, whoever's going to win it is going to come down to, it's especially, I'm going to double down on this fact, if Baltimore takes down Cincy this Thursday. But I feel like it's going to come down to the Browns or the Ravens. And I would say the final 3 wildcard teams, whoever doesn't win the AFC East between the Dolphins and the Bills, I said the Bills were going to win it. I'd say Dolphins are probably going to finish a game or two back. I would say the final 2 wildcard spots, I think they are going to go to the Browns and the Bengals. Those are the 2 other teams I think can make it.
So you think Jacksonville will fall out of the picture completely?
I think Jacksonville will lose to both Cleveland and Cincinnati throughout the remainder of their schedule. That's how I see Jacksonville getting knocked out.
So
not knocked out, but
and really it comes
down
to which, because the AFC is loaded this season. So which teams are going to fall out? I think that Pittsburgh's going to be one of the teams that fall out. I think that their offense is going to be the thing that really torches them in the long run. That offense, I think, will officially catch up to them. And, Matt, I know you have something to say. You're tapping your elbow like, let me talk.
Well, the reason I can 100% agree with you is because so far this season, the Steelers have yet to outgain their opponent. Mm-hmm. Every single game this year, the Steelers' offense has put up less yards than the team they play.
They've been led by the defense. And the defense is great.
The defense is phenomenal.
And the defense is great. They're one
them.
of the best defenses in the NFL. I'm just saying I think the play calling, I think the inexperience on the offense, and I think that the offense is going to catch up to them. And obviously, so I think that they're going to fall out of the running. But which other team is going to fall out on the running? Matt, you can maybe make an argument for the Miami Dolphins as well. The Dolphins, we see they have not won a game, I think, in over 20 weeks, or 20 games, let's say that, against a team that was 500 or better. The Miami Dolphins, they struggle against teams that are 500 and better. They're 6-3 right now, and I'm trying to get a updated schedule on the Miami Dolphins right now. The internet is not my friend, but
I'll tell you the schedule. They got a home game against the Raiders, road game against the Jets and then the Commanders, home game against Tennessee, home game against the Jets, home game against the Cowboys, road game against the Ravens. Final game of the regular season for the Miami Dolphins is a home game against the Bills.
And
That's the schedule.
The final 3 games of the year for the Miami Dolphins are going to be their 3 toughest games, and that's going to be their hardest stretch. That's when you want to be playing your best football. You can make an argument that, yes, even with Miami's high-powered offense, maybe they're going to be the ones that fall out of the playoff picture. You can make an argument that Cincinnati, with their inconsistencies, they'll be the ones that fall out of the playoff picture. You can make an argument saying that Buffalo, with their inconsistencies on offense and with all the injuries on the offensive side of the football and defensive side of the football, maybe the Buffalo Bills, maybe this is a season where they don't make the playoffs. We can also make arguments for, maybe the Texans are playing good football right now. Are they going to drop off at any point later on in the year? Point is, there's a lot of great football left to be played. And there are arguments on every single one of those teams and every single team in the AFC, outside of maybe the Ravens and outside of maybe the Kansas City Chiefs, but there are arguments that you can make for every team on why they will not make the playoffs. But Matt, the great thing? It's only week 10. We have week 11 next week, and it all starts Thursday Night Football. Week 11 for the AFC, this playoff picture, it's got to come together. There's only 7 teams that can make the playoffs, and when it comes down to it, I mean, the AFC is absolutely loaded with talent this season. A lot of football to be played, and I do expect all AFC teams to start beating each other up, especially the divisional opponents.
Oh, 100%. And the other reason I think Miami is not, I wouldn't say they're a lock to make it into the postseason, but I mean, you just take a look at their schedule. You talk about the fact that their win percentage against teams above and below 500 on so far this year. They've not lost to a team below 500, but they also haven't beaten a team above 500. If what I saw was right, Commanders below 500 so far this season. They've got the Jets twice. The Jets below 500. There's a lot of games coming up for this Dolphins team. I'm trying to remember the other 2. Tennessee below 500. Raiders, they're at 500, but it's Miami versus the Raiders. One offense is better than the other. One defense is a little bit better than the other. Obviously, the Raiders' defense is slightly better than Miami, but Miami's offense is strides better than the Raiders' offense is right now. So, I mean, you just take a look at the next 5 games for this Dolphins team. I'm not guaranteeing they go 5-0, but you get the feeling that the Dolphins can go 5-0 in their next 5 games, and that would put them, not locking themselves in, but that would put them up to, an 11-win team on the season. If they go 5-0 their next 5 weeks, every single team in that slate is at or below 500, and we've already seen they're 6-0 against below 500 teams this year. So this Dolphins team, just because of their next 5 weeks, I'm not saying that is going to be they're cemented in the postseason. There's no way they don't make it. But the next 5 weeks for this Dolphins team very well could push them far enough ahead of everybody else, especially with the fact that Browns Steelers still have to play each other. Bengals Steelers still have to play each other. There's a lot of in-division games still left to be played, pretty much in every single division. The Dolphins, with those 5 games, can easily win enough games to put themselves in the postseason.
I will say this, the 7 teams in the AFC, the 7th seed will have to have a 10-7 record. In years past, we've seen them have to have a 9-8 record, sometimes an 8-9 record. This season, that 7th seed will have to have a 10-7 record.
I don't disagree with that.
That's just how competitive the AFC is. That being said, time for a break. We're talking some NFL MVP coming up when we return.
Hi, Daddy. Hi.
How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe.
And I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon. Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Come on, guys, let's call Daddy. Hi, Daddy. Hi.
How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe.
And I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon. Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Come on, guys, let's call Daddy. Hi, Daddy. Hi.
How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe.
And I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon. Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Final couple minutes of this 2-hour show. A special announcement at the end of the show as well, so make sure to stay tuned. But we have a couple of minutes, Matt. And Matt, not only is the playoff picture and the playoff race going to start heating up in the upcoming weeks, but also the MVP race for the NFL. We mentioned this a little bit earlier in the show. CJ Stroud, a rookie, has officially entered the most valuable player conversation. And my argument for that is you look at his numbers and you look at what he's been able to do for the Houston Texans that had the second overall pick a season ago. The Houston Texans were awful a season ago. You look at how CJ Stroud has come into that environment and how he has turned them around, how well he's been playing this season, and how many drives that he's been able to march the football down the field and ended up in game winners. CJ Stroud deserves to be in that conversation, just as Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, and others as well.
And yeah, you just talk about how good CJ Stroud has especially looked these past 2 weeks, but overall in the season, 2 interceptions through the season so far for CJ Stroud, through 9 games. That doesn't happen that often, not for a rookie quarterback. I'm not saying that that's his main stake and his main claim to being a player inside of the MVP hunt right now, but you just see what he's been able to do week in and week out. You see the consistencies. You see the type of throws that he's making. I don't think it should be out of the realm of possibility, and I think it should be talked about more. CJ Stroud being a player, not the front runner right now, but he should definitely be a player that is creeping his way towards that MVP conversation. And I'm not saying he's already locked it in, but he's definitely the player that is poised right now to at least get Offensive Rookie of the Year.
And obviously you haven't locked in anything. You still have quite a bit to play. We're only halfway through the season.
Still got 8 weeks.
Absolutely. Big announcement once again tomorrow. This show tomorrow will not go until 6. This show will go until 5:30. We will have big news at the end of tomorrow's show, and we will have the reason on why we're only going until 5:30 tomorrow. But nonetheless, it's big news. TKDS Sports Network, super excited to announce it as well. Matt, you and I are super excited to announce it. But nonetheless, big news tomorrow at the end of the show. But the only thing we can tell you right now is that show will only go until 5:30. So with that being said, alongside Matthew Pennington, our producer, Kevin Fowler, I'm Jackson Lightcap. Once again, tune in tomorrow from 4 to 5:30. We'll be talking college basketball, NBA basketball, and so much more on Sports Now. But until then, thanks for dealing with us. Happy Monday.